being anxious while you paint sucks. It makes something that should be fun this really awful process, and that's bad enough on its own, but on top of that, it leads to worse results. Also, it's super difficult to try and be creative in any way, shape, or form when you're not enjoying yourself, never mind being consistent. All in all, being anxious is really, really shit. Being anxious while you paint is something that I'm no stranger to. It's something that built up over time for me, starting kind of small, but then over time just grew and grew to the point where I was actually having panic attacks when I was painting. I couldn't even get through a single painting without starting to get this crazy fear that it wasn't going to live up to my expectations. And then I just destroy the painting, start again, hope it would go better, but very quickly would panic again and then would destroy that. And this would basically just loop constantly. I spent probably a good at least 6 months not even managing to finish a single thing because I just panicked so much that I would destroy it. And sometimes I'd destroy like 15 paintings in a day, just in this like loop going on. And it was really brutal and a really sort of terrible thing for motivation. And over time actually led me to quit art completely for 2 years because I just turned it into this really awful process because I couldn't even sit down and do it without feeling so much anxiety. So when I eventually picked up the brushes again, actually around when COVID started, I knew one of the first things I needed to do was actually address this problem that I had of feeling so anxious when I painted, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to do it long term if I didn't solve this. And cut to today, I actually have a really amazing time when I paint. It's probably one of the most enjoyable things, if not the most enjoyable thing that I do. I absolutely love it. And all the paintings kind of don't have this anxiety or even very much frustration anymore. I really, really enjoy the process of painting, whereas before it was just this kind of terrible thing. So in this video, I want to share a few things that I tried that really helped me kind of get over this anxiety hurdle. I'm not saying these will work for you, but these were a massive benefit to me to approach painting this way and really focus on getting rid of this anxiety and turning it from something that I hated and caused me so much pain to something that I really, really enjoy, and it's something that I want to spend the rest of my life doing. Now I'm just going to ramble through kind of what I did, and hopefully something will resonate with you, something will help you, but I don't know, I'm just going to talk a little bit off the cuff about it, as you can tell already. But one thing I do want to kind of stress is I hope that at least in this video will give you some hope that this is something that maybe even if you can't eliminate it, anxiety, particularly when it comes to creative process, is something that you, in my experience, can improve and can make some positive changes around. So the first thing that I sort of noticed when trying to fix this anxiety problem was actually that I was way too identified with painting in general. So what do I mean by that? Well, basically, I'd kind of tied up my identity to me being able to produce what I considered good art. So whenever I would be creating something and it wasn't living up to that expectation, I would feel not worthy as a person. And you can see how that's going to lead to a lot of problems. And each time I would fail, it would be sort of another vote that I wasn't, a good person. And then that would just sort of build and build the more and more I failed and make each next attempt worse and worse. So one of the first things I did was actually just remind myself that it doesn't matter what the painting turns out like. It's not a reflection on who I am as a person. Who you are as a person is so much bigger than any painting that you'll ever do. So I just wanted to remind myself of that, and something that I did continually in the beginning was just remind myself that no matter how the painting turned out, it wasn't a reflection of me as a person. And this is something that's talked about in Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of Art, which is amazing if you haven't read it. He talks about this having this kind of healthy emotional distance when you're working. If you're too close to it, if your identity's too wrapped up in what you're creating, it just causes all sorts of problems and really makes it difficult for you to be objective and, fix problems and deal with the difficult paintings and all that kind of stuff. You need to have that emotional distance. And for me, that just started with reminding myself that I was separate from my paintings. They weren't the same thing as me. I'm not, worse or better based on the quality of the paintings that I produce. It's just something that I do to the best of my ability, but the best of my ability has no impact on how I think about myself. Moving on to a more practical level now, the first thing I did practically was actually to just change the goalpost of what I was aiming for when I was painting. So rather than sitting down and trying to do, the best painting I've ever done, I sat down and just said, the only thing I want to do here is just focus on the next move, the next brushstroke, not think about how it's going to turn out. And the second thing is finish it. So focus on the process exclusively, and I have to finish whatever I start. Not gonna, destroy these, not gonna throw these away. The result doesn't matter. What matters is focusing on the process and finishing it. And this was really difficult to do at first, but something else that I did to make this process easier was actually to set myself time limits. So I'd be like, okay, today I'm going to do a painting. It's going to be 3 hours long, and all I've got to do is sit down and just paint for 3 hours and, add some final touches at the last 15 minutes of that 3 to bring it to a close. And putting that time limit on it was really valuable because it changed the focus again from trying to do something really good to just sit down and focus on painting for 3 hours. Not going to worry about those results again. And I'd also really kind of celebrate whenever I finished one of those paintings. Rather than looking at it at the end and being like, oh, this is really shit. Instead, I'd look at it and be like, hey, I just sat down and painted for 3 hours and finished something that's awesome. I completely forgot about the results, didn't pay attention to it, focused exclusively on actually just getting that painting time in and doing those finishes. And this was still a bit difficult at first. There was definitely a lot of paintings where I'd sort of go back and forth and had to take quite a lot of breaks because I was starting to panic. But over time, working in this way really got me more and more into the actual process, less and less focused on the result and less attached to it as well. And I built this up over time, consistently finishing these paintings, getting those reps, and essentially just getting comfortable with sitting down and going through a painting until I kind of had that emotional distance built in. Something that I did as well while focusing on these quick paintings and just focusing on finishing them was I always did things that I was most comfortable with. So this wasn't a time for me to go and explore a whole bunch of different new techniques and subjects and ideas. I basically picked the stuff that I was already the most comfortable with, the most sort of skilled at, the things that I felt I could do the most comfortably from this base that I was already at, and I focused exclusively on them as well. I wasn't trying to add anything in that would bring some more anxiety. So I always picked the stuff I felt the most comfortable with, sort of set myself up to win the most because I wanted to give my brain less chance to go down that anxious route, and having everything set up to win, even though I wasn't focused on creating a good painting, really helped to kind of keep that anxiety at bay. And then as I started to get more comfortable, as I started to feel less anxious in general, I started to open up and explore some more. Now that was the main thing I did that I would say probably had the biggest impact, that practice of just sitting down, doing paintings, focusing on just finishing them, enjoying the process, not putting any pressure on the result. That was really the thing that kind of did it for me. But there was a couple other things that I did during this period that had a big impact that really helped. So just in general, during this time frame, I did not really look at other artists' work at all. Whenever I would start to compare myself to them. I would think, they're so much better than me. I should be at that stage. Why am I not at that stage? All that kind of bullshit that your mind can, kick off and do. So I made a big effort to not look at much art during this time period and just really focus on doing the paintings and finishing them. The other thing that had a really big positive impact was meditation. I've been meditating for over a decade at this point. It's one of the most valuable things I've ever done. I did keep meditating alongside, and that really helps with that emotional distance idea that I was talking about earlier. One thing I want to point out is I used to have this kind of mindset that you can kind of meditate your way out of anything, and I've been meditating for years and still quit because I got so anxious. So meditating on its own did not stop it for me ultimately, but it really did help with when those anxious thoughts would kick in, having a bit more distance from them rather than being caught up in them. It did help with that, but really for me it came down to changing what I was focused on, not kind of putting this expectation on doing these great paintings, not identifying myself as a person with what I was doing, and just focusing on sitting down, getting those reps in, finishing paintings, and just celebrating the fact that they were getting done and not beating myself up over what ended up on the canvas at the end of the day. So that's basically it. That's kind of how I managed to get over my painting and creative anxiety. Now, again, this wasn't a quick thing. This happened over sort of months and months, but it's never come back since then. It's been years since that point, and I continue to love it, and I actually just enjoy it more and more as I go along. So I hope you take something from that. I hope you give it a shot if it's something that you're struggling with, this kind of creative anxiety. Again, this is just what works for me. Don't know if it'll work for you, but that's my 2 cents on the topic. So that's it from me. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope you go on to create some awesome shit. But more importantly, I hope you have a fantastic time while you're doing it. Cheers.